Okay, so welcome everyone to the October meeting of the Forest Business Alliance Peer Learning Network. So glad that you're all here. And in just a moment, we'll go around and do introductions as we usually do, but I want to just say welcome. And is anyone new for their first time new on to this meeting or this group? Okay, so everyone's been in at least on one call. Great. And Vance won't be here this month, but Jim and I are here co-facilitating. And if you have any questions, you can shoot one of us a chat in the chat messages, or feel free to raise your hand throughout. We have a speaker today, and I'll introduce him shortly, but let's go around, and just for the sake of the recording and for everyone who's watching this later, I'll invite you to please go around and we'll introduce yourself, say where you're calling from, who you're associated with. And this is an opportunity, if there is any sort of project update or anything that may have been discussed at a previous meeting that you'd like to share any new information about, or as Martin just did, if there's any announcements related to wood products, forests, etc., please share them with a group. We'll get them captured in the notes as well, so when we send them out, but that way it can help inform others. So we'll just go around, and if it's okay, I'm just going to call in folks in order so we can just have it be smooth. So Charles, would you like to go first, please?
Sure. I'm Charles Detherow. I go by Chuck. A lot of times I work for the Western Shasta Resource Conservation District out of Anderson, California, which is next to Redding, across from the SPI mill. I'm a registered professional forester and I'm a TSP. And so I work on their forestry projects, field breaks, small landowners, that sort of thing, and always looking for somewhere to put the material. So I'm just watching there and really nothing to report. So anyway, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charles. And really great point about just kind of where you fall in the whole journey and process from woods to and beyond. And also this just helps give our speaker a sense of who's in the room and where they are coming from in that regard as well. So thank you, Charles. Jeff, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Jeff Grief, Plumas Wood Fiber, which is a project to process forest biomass into a substitute for peat moss for the horticultural industry. And I'm deeply immersed in a feasibility study these days.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff. And you did get that funding through CAL FIRE, is that right?
Yes, the feasibility study was funded by a grant from CAL FIRE and also with matching funds from the Plumas County Fire Safe Council. And many thanks to both.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Bill.
Hi, Bill Bach here, VP of Site Acquisition for Collectron Energy. We develop biomass facilities as well as EV charging stations. And my role is project development, but part of that role is to find 1 to 5 acre sites with electric access for our facilities, whether that'll be charging vehicles or putting electricity onto the grid with the biomass facility.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, welcome. Justin, we'll do you before we start, so I'll just continue on. Martin, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Martin Tveer, Biomass Program Director for the Watershed Center. I work statewide on anything wood products, forest biomass related, facilitate the California Ad Hoc Forest Biomass Working Group, and coordinate some of the events of next week's National Forest Products Week. I'll put a PDF document in the chat, and then people can sign up.
Great.
If they're interested. Yeah, please sign up so we know who's showing up and who we're waiting for.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Martin. Appreciate you. Jim, you want to pop on and say hello?
Greetings. Yes, hello. I'm Jim Adrians, and I work with the Forest Business Alliance with Vance. I've done a peer learning network with Vance back in the day, so it's good to be back with him. And then I worked for a grant fund in DC that's a similar size to CAL FIRE, so I help with applicants in their proposal process and help them out with the peer learning network. So yeah, we're always looking for your ideas about topics for the peer learning network. So please share the types of things you're looking for from us.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And Michael.
Hey, good everybody. Mike Becker with Collectron Energy. I'm a co-founder and CEO in my present role. Bill kind of explained what it is that we are about. I'll just add to that. Interestingly enough, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Act is throwing, hundreds of millions of dollars into the state of California to deploy DC fast charging stations, and that has always been a part of our ethos to indirectly fuel those vehicles with these biomass facilities that we're aiming to build. But what we're looking at now is potentially scaling up the deployment of those biomass facilities to align in concert with the deployment of these fast charging station sites along designated corridors. So we have previously applied for the CAL FIRE grant, and I think we were very close with a couple of nuances here and there to be kind of reflected in a remittance of a new grant application, which we're hoping Justin may afford us some update on timelines when that may be looking to come forth here in the next couple of months. But we're looking to get, hit the ground running here in 2025 to take up to, 33,000 green tons or 16,800 BDT per facility that we deploy. So Charles, something you said there kind of pinged me in my brain. I'd love to kind of maybe circle up with you in arrears if there are feedstock needs to off gas that you are looking to accomplish, then maybe we have something to talk about.
Sure. Yeah, and that our district manager is involved in biomass, so get her involved as
Great.
well, Maureen. So anyway, sounds good.
Great.
Promising.
Great. Yeah, thank you both. And that's reminding me, I forgot to mention it, but we also often ask if you want to put your name and your company, your business, and any contact info in the chat as well. That can really facilitate the connections after. People can copy and paste that from different folks. So go ahead and do that when you have time, and we'll capture that way as well. Thanks, Mike. Zach. Zach, it looks like you're muted, but we can't see or can't hear you. Now it's muted. I think you're just changing microphones. Okay, we'll come back to you, Zach. Nina.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Nina Natina. I'm with GoBiz, Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Justin participates in our weekly partners calls, so cool to be on here with him. That's why I'm here, Justin, to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
Yeah, my role is covering the 14 northernmost counties in the state. I work from my home office in Redding in Shasta County, and I help businesses navigate state incentive programs, one of which is the CAL FIRE Business and Workforce Development Grant. So talk to a lot of companies involved in biomass from different angles, and that's just one of the resources we try to let them know about.
Great. Thanks so much, Nina. Sherry Lynn.
Hello. I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure how stable my internet is, so it might kick me off. But I work with the Forest Business Alliance as a tribal liaison. So I coordinate and organize a tribal specific peer learning network and workshops. And I just wanted to join today because the tribes are always very interested in workforce development. So I'm excited to hear what's going on there.
Thanks, Sherilyn. Is that also you on the phone, or is that somebody else on the phone?
It's not me on the phone.
Not you. Okay, who do we have on the phone?
It might be me, Tom Maseko, calling in from Chicago.
That
was
is you.
supposed
Hi,
to be home
Tom.
about an hour. Hey, sorry, was supposed to be home about an hour ago, but Donald Trump's visit to Chicago has shut down highways and created gridlock. So I'm calling in from the highway. Sorry about that. I am my background is in finance and business development through the private equity world and corporate world. I'm now an independent consultant, been working for a couple of years helping mission-driven, environmentally friendly organizations and businesses think about building business models to sustainably finance and grow themselves into the future. So sorry, apologize for being on the phone.
Yeah, glad you can make it, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, good to know who the mystery phone person is too. And Zach, do you want to try again?
Okay, can people hear me?
There we go.
Woo, awesome. Great to see some familiar faces. My name is Zach Browning. I'm with the Sierra Institute up in Plumas County, and I'm the Shared Stewardship Advisor here. So I work with 4 national forests in the region of doing cross-boundary collaborative fuel reduction projects. And the reason why I joined this call is I'm working with one of the collaboratives in El Dorado, the South Fork of the American River, and we're looking at just doing some workforce development, kind of white paper stuff in that county. And so yeah, just saw that Justin was coming on for workforce development, and just happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Zach. And I think that's everyone, right? Did I miss anybody? Okay, great. And my name's Kathleen, and I'm also with the Forest Business Alliance team. I'm helping to facilitate these all these online meetings for the Peer Learning Network. So welcome, we're really glad you're here. And so if you saw the email announcement about this is the first in a series of 3 focused on workforce development. So through the end of the year, will be the focus. We did include in the email a brief survey, and I haven't looked to see how many have already responded, but I'll give you till later today before I go look and be surprised. But please, it's really a short survey. We're just really wanting to get a sense of where the focus is, where support is most needed, so that we can really focus that energy and serve everyone to the best of our abilities. So please take that link, and I will put the link here in the chat in case you didn't see it. And then we're going to move on to the speaker. So we'll have Justin speak, and then we'll have time for Q&A after. And Justin, did you have a hard stop at 1, or is your time flexible?
Yeah, I'm pretty flexible. I'm probably good until 1:30.
Okay, so if we need to go a little over, we'll see, depending on the types of questions, and that's where we get. So Justin is the CAL FIRE Wood Products and Bioenergy group with that group, and provides grants to businesses and organizations through the Business and Workforce Development Program. He identifies strategic opportunities for state investment in workforce and business development projects in the forest sector. Business development goals include expanding existing and aiding in establishment of new wood utilization infrastructure across the state in coordination with federal, state, and local partners. Workforce development goals include identifying and supporting strategic opportunities to expand forest sector workforce training opportunities in California, including equipment operators, forestry, fire, and manufacturing. He's an RFP and has an MS in ecology from Utah State as well. And look at that, you were already able to share.
I know, but I don't want to be on this slide. There we go. Well, you're going to get to see my whole slideshow in reverse.
And everyone can see the slides okay? Just a thumbs up if that's working. Great.
Cool.
Okay. So Justin, thank you so much for being here, and go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. Trying to get my view set up. So yeah, there's a diverse audience here. I know most of you, so thanks for tuning in. You probably heard me give this spiel before or heard me talk about it, but happy to be here today. Along those lines, given that there is such a diversity, this is a pretty general presentation, so I'm looking forward to the conversation, and hopefully I can please ask questions. Anything is fair game, and I'll give you my mildly informed perspective. But yeah, as Kathleen mentioned, Justin Britton, I work in CAL FIRE's on the wood products team, and that's within CAL FIRE's climate and energy program under the larger umbrella of resource management. And the primary goal of our team is to sort of address what have been identified as the bottlenecks to pace and scale. And so that being infrastructure, which that came up in the introductions, and there are several folks on the call that are working on addressing that bottleneck, and then also workforce development. So as CAL FIRE ramped up all the state investments in this kind of work, it became clear very quickly that folks, there was a need. We need people to get the work done. We need places to take this biomass. And so you all probably know this, but we've been around. Our program has been active since 2022. We've offered 6 solicitations in that time, picking up over 100 projects and putting about $125 million in grants out there. And so, as I mentioned, we're working with businesses and also workforce training programs. Real quickly, the kind of business development projects that we've worked with, folks that are wanting to scale up, like sort of contractors scaling up their operations. So if they can get more tons of biomass through a chipper like this, and get more work done on the landscape. The same goes with small sawmills, similar story. So this supports work on the landscape as well as providing jobs. We're here to talk about workforce, and so we'll dive into those details a little more deeply. Of those investments that I mentioned, about 50 million has went to workforce development projects, 36 projects total. In preparing the presentation, I kind of grouped things up, but there's quite a bit of overlap between these categories. So a lot of firefighting and forestry sort of technician programs that we funded that might be through a nonprofit or a community college. Once again, as I mentioned, overlap. We have some, community college grantees offering forestry certificates, like 2-year forestry programs. We have some professional development projects. I'm thinking like the Sierra Nevada Alliance. This is the photo on this slide, comes from them, where they take folks that probably have graduated college and have spent a couple of years in the field, but want to sort of develop the professional skills, so like project management type stuff. Really interesting and diverse. Heavy equipment operators, we know there's a need kind of across the forest sector, but Shasta College is one of those programs. There's a new one starting up in Tuolumne County. A different model, but interesting nonetheless. And then forestry specific projects. And I do want to mention, while it's not a CAL FIRE funded project, there was a large injection of funding into forestry workforce in California through a federal economic development, EDA, I don't know what the A stands for, agency, association. They went through the Foundation for California Community Colleges, and that was a $22 or $3 million grant, where they put a sort of collection of folks, most of the community colleges in the state that are doing something forestry or climate related, anywhere from so there's a lot of overlap in terms of what our funding is supporting and what they're supporting and so forth. But it's a cool program, and one that I'm participating in. Yeah. So a couple specific examples of our workforce projects. This is the Integrated Fuels Management program at Reedley College, and it's fantastic. I'm actually going to highlight it in a couple of weeks. We're going to get the CAL FIRE communications team down there. It's been so popular that the CAL FIRE units down there have went through the quite bureaucratic process of entering into an MOU with the college, because the sort of the work ethic that the folks that are running the program are instilling in these kids is admirable and very attractive to the department, which is great because CAL FIRE is a great employer. The instructors there next to me on the front left of the photo, both of them were one was a former smoke jumper and the other was a CAL FIRE captain. So they come with a lot of experience in their, yeah, a lot of happy folks in the photo. And then one that is, I'm sure most folks are familiar with, but this is Shasta College's HELO program, where they run an academy style heavy equipment operators. I think it's a 16-week program. They do get some entry-level natural resource courses, and then all the students get experience running the typical logging equipment that you find on a logging job, and the sort of the pinnacle or the final exam, so to speak, of the program. They do an in-woods skills showcase, and so they have all the students out, and they have local contractors come out, and the students get to show off their skills. They kind of run around each piece of equipment with like a large magnet with a number on it, and folks are, the employers are taking notes, and it's often that the kids get jobs on the spot, which is pretty neat. And there's some real interesting organic sort of apprenticeship stuff happening in the industry up here, and this is in Reading. And I should have mentioned that's where I'm at. I live in Reading, but nonetheless, sort of the poster child for forestry workforce development, and they kind of got a head start on folks back in starting in 2019. So these are, I'm going to talk about, I guess, what I'm calling them observations. They're sort of anecdotes and things that I think to be true, but this is not, backed by data. But I tend to feel that the proposals that we see is sort of kind of the only game in town when it comes to large pots of funding for workforce development. The types of proposals that we see tend to match what the up and coming workforce is interested in. I think with wildfire being in the spotlight so much, it's not a surprise that we get a lot of proposals related to, fire technician skills and people getting qualified to fight fire. I know I spent a lot of time, those of you that may have tried to contact me via email this summer know that I've been out a lot and interacting with folks on fire assignments. And when you run it into young folks that have experienced that in their neighborhood or affecting their family or their favorite recreation place, they want to get engaged. They want to go out and they're like, I want to be a firefighter now. Like, because I think if your home's been saved, like firefighters are heroes and they want to be a part of that. So that's interesting. Another observation I have is related to more so the private sector. And so we know there's a shortage of truck drivers. There's plenty of CDL programs out there. And I think when it comes to like log trucks and forest biomass trucks, that I think, there's sort of an extra layer of challenge involved because you can drive a truck in town or you can just stay on the interstate rather than, being on a landing at 2:30 in the morning on, sketchy roads in the dark and so forth. So, so we hear that often. The Shasta College program does get the folks that come through that program qualified to drive trucks. I think by the end of their academy style HELO program, the students have had all the experience and sort of information required for them to go. They could go the next day and get their CDL or their Class A, whatever. So that's interesting, but we know there's still a big need. And when I talk to contractors in the private sector, trucks seem to be the limiting factor, and they often complain about how much they have to pay their contracted truck drivers. And it's, you know, 180, 200 bucks an hour or something like that if you have your own truck, which is pretty good money. But regulations and other things drive, I think it have been sort of a roadblock as emission standards change. And a lot of the trucks that are in the fleet currently will have to get phased out, and it's an expensive investment. The other thing we hear a lot from the private companies we're working with is, you know, like the trades in sawmills, et cetera, you know, electricians and millwrights, those tend to be hard to find. And we've had a lot of conversations with folks in the industry about how they could structure a grant proposal that we could support them on. But we haven't really seen any of that come through, any real solid ideas. And I don't know why that is. But in case you're not familiar, if you're a private business looking to hire and train your own workers for the benefit of your business, you can apply to a grant from us, but it would have to be structured like a business development grant. We would expect there to be match, where on our other sort of nonprofit geared workforce grants, we don't require that level of match. And so I think, you know, when it comes down to it, if you're trying to grow your business, you have the option of, you know, proposing the purchase of equipment, which, you know, is a big capital investment, or hiring and training folks. And I think folks tend to prioritize that equipment purchase. And so, and we've also seen really interesting developments. You know, sort of the leader in the sector would, in my opinion, is Sierra Pacific, and they're doing a lot of in-house workforce development where they've developed their own curriculum in classrooms, and they have sawmills all over the Western United States, kind of in the Pacific Northwest, and they are bringing folks from all over and training them up on their internal curriculum, so that they can sort of build that knowledge in-house, which I think is really creative. But it does take resources, and not every business has that. So really interesting. And then Nina's here. You're probably more familiar with this than I am. Matter of fact, I'm certain that you are. But one thing that we have been able to do, especially with our startup grantees, is connect them with this Go Business Employment Training Panel. I think they're out of Go Business. Nina can correct me.
They're not. They're separate.
They're
Yeah.
separate. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you have to Google. They're on
Yeah.
the Go Biz weekly call. So that's why I make that association. But nonetheless, you should check out Employment Training Panel. And Kathleen, I think that might be an interesting, and Nina and I could help you make the connection. But you know, if you're still looking to fill slots on the agenda, it occurred to me as I was preparing this presentation that would be a really good fit, given the sort of folks that are on this call, because ETP, at least in the fashion that I've been connecting them with folks, is where we're working with a business who may be upgrading their technology or starting up altogether, and they're looking to hire folks, but that's a huge cost. And what the Employment Training Panel can offer is a wage sharing. So for those training hours, it's not just for hours worked, but if you can document, you know, there's a qualified person, whether you hire them from outside or they're within the company, and they're offering training to employees, there's cost sharing that can occur up to, you know, I think it's 20 something dollars an hour, which is fairly substantial. And I think those awards, so to speak, those contracts, you know, can exceed a couple $100,000. So that's a huge help. So moving on, kind of looking ahead. So workforce development is a hot topic. I mean, it's there. Last year it was like the fall of workforce development. It was a topic at several conferences, including the, you know, California Licensed Foresters Association. The folks at the Foundation for Community Colleges have done a couple workforce summits, forestry workforce summits, and they've been very well attended. But what I perceive, or what is the case, is that there's really not, it hasn't, like, the needs within the state, everybody knows there's a need, but nobody's quantified it to a rigorous level. So how many forestry workers do we need? A lot. Well, how many is a lot? Like, we don't know that answer. And so the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force has a workforce development working group. Some of you may have been involved. I was involved in the first 2 iterations of that, and what we've learned is that, you know, we need to take a more rigorous quantitative approach and bring in economists and so forth to sort of kind of nail this need down so we can justify you know, asking for the support. So that's really interesting. And then, yeah, I'm sure many of you heard, like, AB 338, which was putting fuels reduction work under the umbrella of public works, and therefore those sorts of jobs will be required to pay prevailing wage. And that's, I think the jury's kind of out on that. I know it hasn't came into full effect yet, but it will soon. I think nonprofits would be subjected to those rules starting next year or maybe 2026. But nonetheless, the jury's still out in terms of how that is going to impact the sector. I think I've heard perspectives on either side, you know, folks saying that it's going to really drive up the cost per acre of getting this work done if we double the wages for these folks. And then on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, we can't get people to do the work. So if we double their wages, then the people will be here to do the work. So we'll see. In CAL FIRE, you know, we take a neutral position on such policies. So, but I am interested to see how that shakes out. Yeah, so that's my presentation. My information's here. Picture here is our wood products team. Although Sonoy standing next to me there, he took a promotion to a different job in the department, so we no longer have him. But yeah, so here's my contact info. Feel free, reach out if you have questions related to our grant program. I know, Mike, you mentioned wanting to know the timeline for our next solicitation. That's kind of up in the air currently. We don't have any earmarked funding in the latest iteration of the budget, but we're confident that we'll have something to offer this spring. We don't know how much yet, and we don't know the exact dates, because there's some changes happening with the sort of the grant management software that we're using in terms of how our solicitations will be managed. So as soon as those bugs get worked out, we'll have something. But I'm sure the Forest Business Alliance folks will make that announcement as soon as we make the announcement to the folks that are following along. But with that, I know that was a pretty general overview, and folks have very specific things they're working on, and so I'd be happy to give my opinion on, or give my thoughts on any questions you might have.
Thanks so much, Justin. I appreciate this much. Yeah. Let's open it up to questions, either about anything. Yeah, and if you want to stop the share, then we can do a perfect. Nina, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. Justin, there's always so much interest and activity around when those timelines, when the applications open, right? The next solicitation, how much money is available, and then eventually notice of award. How do you track post-award activity and the impact that the money's had, where those projects end up going? Are they continuing to grow? Did they make a difference? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we are very keen on tracking. It's often, we'll get these fire drills that'll come down from from above. I don't know who. Oftentimes the legislature, when they're making funding decisions, and they'll want to say, what's the impact been on X? And so those of you on the call, I know Jeff, you've done the reporting. Martin's familiar. With all of our grantees, when even, I guess, yeah, with the Forest Business Alliance, they're a grantee. This webinar is funded by CAL FIRE. We have folks propose metrics when they apply to get a project, and then each time, whether it's quarterly or when they submit an invoice up to as frequently as monthly, they report on the impacts that our funding is having. So that might be for a business, they may propose, we're going to get this piece of equipment, and when we do, we're going to process X amount more biomass, and we're going to have to hire 3 people. And so as they're hiring those folks, they'll report that. And then as they're processing biomass, they'll report those quantities also. And then all that gets fed into like a database that we can easily query to sort of generate those stats. And then, we don't have a whole lot of influence once our project ends. And I know for example, like the community colleges, I'm thinking about Shasta College, and we asked them to track what their graduates are doing with the skills that they earned and whether or not they're in the sector, but it's hard, that can be hard to get also. So it's sort of on a volunteer basis. I mean, they'll know who they got their initial job with. But even in that case, even though they're trained on logging equipment, those skills are transferable, and folks, I think some percentage of them end up going to work for construction companies in town and operate equipment, things like that. Does that answer your question, Nina?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I imagine there's always grant requirements on the reporting end, but I think as businesses, and I'm always thinking of the business side, as they grow, then there's new opportunity to connect with other businesses, right? And so I'm just wondering how that kind of ecosystem is being tracked or cultivated as these grant funds are flowing into specific entities, and that's harder to do.
It is very hard, but it's interesting you bring that up, because we do recognize, I mean, we've connected dozens and dozens of folks to other folks, and what's the impact of that, kind of using our network to the broader benefit of the sector. And that's not something we're trying to quantify.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, Michael, you want to go ahead?
Can we hear me? Yep. Okay. Two-part question here, one for Justin, one for Nina. Justin, and again, not trying to put you backed up against a cactus here, but just trying to understand when you
Go
say
ahead and try, man.
When you say spring, are you thinking spring for the actual open enrollment to start receiving applications, or are you thinking the awardee announcements as per last year?
Based on what I understand to be the case, we probably won't advertise until sometime in the spring, but that could be February or that could be April. I don't know. But as I mentioned, the latest that we've heard is that the application portal software is going to get updated, and they want us to be the guinea pigs on using that new application software, as we were with eCivis back in 2022. So we're kind of hamstrung on that, and it's out of our hands in terms of when that happens. But optimistically, I mean, we'd love to be able to advertise in January and stick to our regular schedule, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Copy that. Thank you. It helps for planning, as we have obviously lots of moving parts in a deal of our size. To that end, second question to Nina, regarding the employee training cost share, could you delve a little bit further into that process, or if it's best for us to take it offline? I'm happy to do that as well. I've sent you an email in the meantime.
Yes, I saw that email. Yeah, I can talk about it just briefly, ETP, Employment Training Panel. We have a whole different organization. I think they're under the Department of Labor. Our ETP team is really dedicated. They seem to always have money. They get to the events, they do a lot of outreach, and they know what they're doing. So it's a reimbursement program. You come up with a contract either as the employer providing the training, so you are a single employer contract, or there's a multiple employer contract where you would actually work through, let's say, a Shasta College or something that would provide that training. So your ETP contact will help you figure out what's going to work best for you. And then you write up a proposal that gets reviewed. There are no application timelines or windows for this program. It's on a rolling basis, so they'll always work with you.
Okay.
And yes, they did just increase the dollar amounts for the wage reimbursement, and it's in the higher 20s. I was just trying to look through my notes because I just captured that information earlier this week. And then the maximum award amount, it also was raised to hundreds of thousands, several hundreds of thousands of dollars. They do have they've been marketing a push on ag and timber and wood employers this year. So I guess you get a little more attention if you're in that sector. So this would be a good time to reach out and talk to them. And I agree with Justin, they'd be a good resource, Robert Meyer, to have on this call to talk through it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And is that per trainee, as in the 23 per trainee? Is that
per hour? Yes, wage
so
per hour,
$100,000 roughly per trainee?
Oh no, the $20 is per wage. That the contract amount is related to that many hundreds of thousands. I'll pull it up while we're still talking, and I'll throw some information into the.
So I threw some stuff in the chat, but it sounds like it's been updated.
Yeah.
I put a blurb in there, and that's what Robert, shared with me to share with our grantees or folks that are interested. And then there's also a flyer that is probably dated also, but it sort of outlines that program.
That's fantastic. So we can, in short, summarize, we have 4 to 6 full-time employees that we're looking to hire. We can do that on our own accord to our own standards, but then bring in ETP to kind of offset or reimburse the cost of training them up to scale.
Yes, that's exactly. It's a cost share. Yep.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you both. Who else has questions? And thank you, Justin, for putting that in the chat and capturing that information as well.
You can follow up with myself or Nina if you want more info, and I can help make that connection.
Great. And Nina just put in the chat as well, the project cap for 24-25 for single employment contracts is 600,000. So great. Thank you. And Jim, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Justin, if you, when people are looking for workers, like more short term, have you found any good resources to go to for kind of forestry employment, or do people just use the standard kind of, I don't, I'm not sure what they would use if you're looking to hire, but I just wondered if you have seen any good places to refer people to when they have openings or trying to expand, or maybe they've gotten a grant and they want to staff up. I don't know.
Yeah.
There may not be one,
Good
but
question. That's not a service that we've offered or that we've even been approached to offer to help with. But I do hear from folks that, for example, there's a small sawmill here in Reading, and they tend to access folks through like a H2O employment services, I think is what it is. It's a temporary service. If they work out, they'll bring them on full time. But in the sector generally, I worked for a large industrial landowner prior to CAL FIRE, and the bulk of the labor type, unskilled, so to speak, jobs came from H-2B visa workers. Given that we're in Northern California, close to Oregon, most of those companies came out of Oregon, but they would be migrant workers, and those are the folks that plant trees and do thinning jobs, and also and do like the herbicide work. But yeah, good question. But it's not something we've been approached on. Like, can you help us find someone to hire? Has not been something we've had to deal with.
Yeah, maybe that's something we can work on a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know the California Forestry Association got a workforce grant from us where they're that's for those that don't know, it's the professional association that represents the industry. So if you are an industrial landowner or a sawmill owner of industrial size, you're likely a member, and CFA represents them, and they got a project funded through our program for workforce development where they're partnering with sort of minority represented media outlets to get the word out about forestry in the sector generally, to non-traditional folks that wouldn't typically would not have engaged historically in forestry work. And that's still a fairly new project. There was just a media event a couple months ago, Sacramento, for that. But that it's so we'll see. It's an interesting approach that'll hopefully will do some good.
Yeah, the California Licensed Forestry Association, there has an online job application site. So if somebody were to Google forestry, they'd come up, or forestry job, and there's a lot of listings for both for professionals, but for technicians as well. And then the professional forestry registration also will fly out jobs.
Yeah, often. I know when I was early career, I looked at CLFA all the time, because that's the best place for California forestry job postings.
Thank you. Charles, did you have another question too, or?
No, that was it.
Yeah,
lot
thank you.
of for whenever anybody's really looking for a forestry job in California, that's one of the best sites. If it's going to be on the private side, then you could try to go through the Forest Service has listings too. It's more complicated, but they post jobs on there all the time for people.
Yeah, and the same with CAL FIRE. The state's hiring process is really complicated also. But we have our own workforce unit, which is interesting, but it's specific to, for the most part, they offer support for entry-level firefighter positions. There's like a hotline and an email inbox and stuff, because as the department's kind of scaling up with some changes that are happening, there's a big need to grow the workforce.
Yeah, thank you. Who else has any questions for Justin or anything else that's come up?
Let me off easy.
We are almost at that 1 o'clock hour, but we have some flexibility, but if not, that's fine as well. I just want to make sure people have an opportunity while we're here. And also never a bad question, because probably somebody who's watching the recording is like, oh, I wish they would have asked that one question. So.
Yeah, one thing that just struck me as you were talking, Chuck, you mentioned you're an RPF. I am also, and there tends to be sort of, if you ask anybody, we need more RPFs. And that's another one where we haven't seen a really solid idea in terms of how to do that. I know, and if you're watching, you don't know what an RPF is. It's a registered professional forester, the certification to do forestry in California. But YG's study group has been successful in helping folks pass the test. we kind of bouncing some ideas around with helping them formalize that, sort of solidify it on a more accessible platform. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, but in some of the professional development project that I talked about, Sierra Nevada Alliance, when they consulted with us about their proposal, I really encouraged them to include an RPF angle in there, because right now their participants are working with RCDs, some are with the Forest Service, CAL FIRE at the nurseries even picked up folks. But I met with them several times, like how can we get people on the RPF track, and it's been challenging to figure that out, whether that's with like consulting foresters. It's just been difficult to get them to take that on. So
Right, the RCDs have been hiring up on RPFs or people who want to be RPFs to try to get some of the forestry work done, whether it's through NRCS or through CAL FIRE. Now there's that forestry apprenticeship thing that's coming online. I've only scanned it, but that's another route to get into being an RPF.
oh yeah, it gives you an easier test, right?
Yep, and it's based on experience and apprenticeship. And again, I've read through it, but I don't know other than that.
Yeah, I think it's
So yeah, that thing YG, a lot of people pass the test here. They're short on RPFs. That's a huge need for them, and a lot of them are making pretty good money with grants.
yeah.
There's a good income now for them.
Great, thank you. Okay, last call, anyone? Okay. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much. Oh, Michael, go ahead. Or you're just waving goodbye. Yeah, thank you, Justin, for this information and the links, and we'll send out these notes and post them soon, and including the PDFs that you shared and that Martin shared. So appreciate this, and we'll look forward to seeing you same time, same place next month. I know sometimes there's been some issues with the link, so just make sure that you've registered through the FBA website under the Peer Learning Network, and that will take you automatically to the recurring meetings and the link there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us in the meantime. And that one, just as a confirmation, is November 19th, Tuesday at noon. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Justin.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much, Justin.